Hi, the question that I was asked is, what is kosher and why? Now that's a huge question, difficult to address in a few minutes, but we'll try. First of all, kosher does not mean blessed by a rabbi. Kosher means that this food is fit for eating. According to biblical law, certain animals are kosher, certain animals are not. Certain animals may be eaten, certain animals may not. So for example, of land animals, they must be animals that chew their cud, ruminants, like cows, sheep, goats, and they must also be slaughtered in a correct way, meaning their trachea, esophagus, which also will cut the carotid and the jugular, must be cut with a smooth back and forth motion by an extremely sharp knife without any nicks, etc., etc., which produces very quick unconsciousness followed by very quick death. If it's an animal of the sea, then it must have fins and scales to be kosher, which of course is most fish, salmon, tuna, herring, etc. Most fish in the sea, excludes things like crustaceans, invertebrates, sea mammals, etc. Those are not kosher. And when it comes to birds, then there's a certain list of birds which are not kosher, like eagles and vultures and hawks and falcons and parrots. And there are birds which are kosher, and there are certain signs, but I will not go into those, we don't have time, but things like chickens and ducks and pheasants and geese, all of which are kosher birds. In terms of plants, all plants are basically kosher, but if they're grown in Israel, then tithes must be taken from them, given to the priests, the Levites, the poor, and whatever must be done must be grown under certain rules that are the agricultural laws of the land of Israel. And in addition, you have to ensure that the vegetables and fruits are free of infestation by insects and bugs, which are prohibited to eat based on the previous rules. Also, things that come from non-kosher animals generally are not kosher, with one exception, honey. But otherwise, milk must come from a kosher animal. Camel milk, not kosher. Cow milk, kosher. And extracts of these animals which are not kosher are also not kosher, as again, with the exception of honey, which comes from bees, but it's kosher. Maybe we'll talk about that in a future time. So that's a general rule of the laws of kashrut, what makes something kosher. So in order to ensure that the food I'm eating is kosher, it must be supervised by someone who is A, knowledgeable of these laws, and B, cares about them, i.e. it must be someone who actually observes these laws and who actually knows about them. So generally what we call the kosher supervision, mashkiach, usually it's a rabbi. It doesn't have to be a rabbi, but it has to be someone who is concerned with kashrut and who is knowledgeable about it, for obvious reasons. And therefore, when something which is commercially made, I don't buy it or eat it until I see that it's got some type of registered trademark, which is a kosher symbol. Because if it just says kosher, that's not a registered trademark. If it just says K, not a registered trademark, it must be a copyrighted symbol so that I know that it's actually kosher. That's pretty much summary of many of the laws of kashrut. There's a lot more to be said. I'm not going to go into it. You can look in my book, Gateway to Judaism. There are there is more than that, but I want to give you 5 basic reasons behind these laws of kashrut. Number one, and fairly obvious, is the idea of self-control. Our eating, which very often is instinctive, should really be under the control of our thought and conscious process. That means if I'm hungry, I don't say, oh, I'm hungry, let me eat. No, I say, I'm hungry, let me see, is this kosher, is it not kosher? And is this mixture okay? Because I did forget to mention, milk and meat are not mixed. We do not mix milk and meat, so no pepperoni pizza, no cheeseburgers, no Philadelphia cheesesteak, etc. So therefore, the first and most obvious aspect of kosher is to be conscious and mindful of what I'm eating, when I'm eating, and how I'm eating. If I keep kosher, I must stop and think. I must make a decision. It cannot be a purely instinctive, I'm hungry, I eat. That's number one, and that's fairly obvious. Number two is the idea of national cohesion, keeping the Jews together. We have places where we eat, we have places where we don't eat, we have places where we gather together to buy our fill, the kosher grocery store, the kosher restaurant. So the existence of a kosher or a Jewish style of eating is something which actually helps prevent assimilation, keeps the Jewish people together, and it helps us in terms of our identity. Number 3, character traits, meaning I should be concerned not just about the fact that I have food to eat, but where the food comes from. In other words, I should be aware that this comes from an animal. I should be aware that the animal should be killed in a way which is as painless as possible. I should be aware of the way the animal is raised. I should be aware of damage to the animal which is got a fatal injury or disease, not kosher. Animal which is treated horrifically and has all types of problems, not kosher. So therefore I have to be aware. And that means hopefully cultivating good character traits within the person. In addition to which, there is also the mystical concept. The mystical concept of kashrut is that just like there are foods which we know affect the mind, like alcohol and drugs, and caffeine, etc. So we also believe that food affects the soul and the sensitivity of the soul, the sensitivity of the person to that which is spiritual. According to many of our great sages, and the Kabbalists specifically, the laws of kashrut are designed to give us a diet which helps us in our spiritual sensitivity and avoiding foods which desensitize us spiritually. That would be a fourth reason behind the laws of kashrut. Is that 4? We had the idea of self-control, the idea of national cohesion, anti-assimilation. We have number 3, the idea of character traits. Number 4, the mystical idea. And number 5, the philosophical, which is, according to Maimonides, a way of avoiding and staying away from idolatry, meaning idolatrous practices included drinking blood, included mixing different species together and milk and meat and all types of stuff like that, worshipping various animals, by eating these animals, by being careful about not having the blood, by being careful about not mixing things together. We are also making a declaration of protest against idolatry and keeping ourselves away from these idolatrous and pagan practices. So that's a little bit of the idea of kashrut. The rest is commentary. Go and learn, and thank you for watching.